Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. It's Dara here again today, and we've got another episode of From Sprue to Skullthrone. It's going to be a real fun one today because we're working on your favorite and mine, Wally the World Eater. So grab yourselves a brew, we're going to break this one down for you all, and let's dive in. Okay, so it's going to be Wally the World Eater today, guys. This is a real fun one for me because a little while ago, earlier the past year, I saw like this post on Reddit which was talking about Wally the World Eater. I'm sure you've seen the memes and stuff, but yeah, it got me thinking recently, like, what will I do with all my Berserker spare bits and stuff like that. So I said I'd put together Wally the World Eater and do a little painting tutorial for you all for a little bit of fun, but also this is sort of an effort for me to try and convey the grimdark painting scheme that I'm kind of familiar with, but using only the range of Citadel paints. I won't be touching any oils, no enamels, no pigments today. We're just going straight in with the acrylics. We're going to see what we can do. Can we make Wally the World Eater look cool using only Citadel paints? It's a real tough challenge for me. I haven't gone mono acrylic in a very long time, so it's going to be pretty fun, I think. And to be honest, if you're interested in learning how to do the 40k, red and brass color scheme using only Citadel paints, this could be a pretty good video for you as well if you're kind of, looking to get that sort of a technique going down. So it might not just be a joke video. Some of you might find some helpful tips and tricks in this one. It's going to be an exploratory journey, and you'll probably see my slow descent into madness as we go into this one. So let's get the paints, let's get the model. We're going to start into this.
Okay, so I've managed to put Wally together. Now, just looking at this model, I'm asking myself a lot of questions. This is going to be a real challenge to try and make this guy look cool. There's a lot of interesting components in this guy, which I think are going to make it quite difficult to kind of bring him out. First of all, like, this whole helmet is quite amusing. Like, the main thing about mini painting, a lot of the time your attention is drawn towards the head of a model. So having a good helmet or head choice is really crucial in sort of making a model interesting. And this helmet is really something. Yeah, I really don't know what's going on with this skull face, but we take those. We also have this strange ammo belt going on kind of across his chest here. That's cool too. And then we have these really fun, like, oven gloves. I don't know what they are. Like, these strange gloves, which have always puzzled me on the Berserker kit. But yeah, overall, this is what we're looking at. This is the challenge we have ahead of ourselves. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of questions being asked here. A lot of difficult obstacles to overcome in order to make this guy look not terrible, but it's going to be a fun time. I am a bit of a glutton for punishment, so you guys are going to see me suffering an awful lot in this video. Hope that's going to be a fun time for you. We're going to start by basing out the armor and getting that worked up, so we're going to go with the classic 40k color scheme. We got to do it. Because we're trying to make this guy look a bit cooler, we're going to go for a darker than normal sort of red, a kind of more shadowy mottled kind of look. It's going to be fun to work that one up. But yeah, let's dive into the painting of this guy and see how we do. Okay, so to start on the red armor, we're going to get a foundation layer going. For this, I'm using a mix of Wordbearer's Red and Rhine Oxide to get a kind of like brownish red tone going down. Now, I've watered it down a little bit so that we can get a nice kind of build up over a couple of different layers, and it gives this kind of like really nice reddish brown sort of foundation to work from. I'm actually a really big fan of Wordbearer's Red as a paint. I think it's really nice, and essentially we're just going to lay this down over the model, and then we are going to start working in some red tones. So it's probably going to take us maybe 2 or 3 thin layers to get a nice even tone on Wally here. We're going to come back at once that's all done. Okay, so we've laid down the foundation layer of that word bearers and Rhinox hide mix. We're going to start building up some armor tones now, and we're going to do that by using just pure word bearers red at this point. We're essentially going to be modeling this on in a somewhat like kind of stippling motion, and basically what you want to do here is leave a little bit of that previous foundation layer kind of towards the bottom of the armor segments around where the trim is going to be, so that we can get a nice kind of fading tone going on. We're going to build this up over several layers of kind of consecutively brighter reds to start to get a kind of interesting tone going on in the armor where it's not exactly a uniform color, which will help us kind of get that grubbier, grittier kind of aesthetic going on. And the reason we're doing this over the way I normally paint them is because we won't be doing an oil wash on this model, since we're just using the Citadel range. And you can kind of start to get that grimdark tonality going if you do this sort of stippling motion. So you can see we're kind of like stabbing at the armor segments, which is a pretty fun and easy way to do. It's kind of like somewhere between a dry brushing motion and a normal way of layering. You can kind of be a bit loose and random with it as well, which is nice. You don't really have to focus too much. I like to use an older kind of brush that has the bristles sort of already starting to break up, as it kind of helps get that variation going. So we're going to do this over the whole model, and then we're going to come back for the next step. Okay, we're going to start stippling on the next layer now, and we're kind of going with that same modeling pattern. This time I've taken a mix of Mephiston red with just a touch of Rhinox hide. I mean, like a very, very small amount. You'll kind of tell when you mix it together, you're going to start to get sort of like brick red almost tone. That'll match quite well with the word bearers red that we laid down in the previous layer. So this time with our modeling technique, we're basically just working a little bit higher up on those armor panels. You know, you can see we're leaving some of the previous two layers behind to get a nice like shadowy effect going on. We're building up a sense of light and a sense of tone on this guy. We've got a lot of questions still about this model. It's so strange, but I think we're not doing terribly. And it's certainly adding to the challenge by using just the Citadel range of paints, because you know they're very bright a lot of the time, so it can be hard to work that kind of grimdark tone in when you are using such bright pigments on these models. But I think it's going okay. You know, my sanity has only slipped a touch so far, which is nice. So we're going to get this laid down, and then we're going to come back for the next layer. Okay, so we have our next layer finished up now. He's starting to gain a little bit of volume. So we're going to go with one more modeling layer on this guy, and this time we're just going to take straight up Mephiston red. Basically repeat the same process, just working on kind of the highest points in the model by now. So kind of where the light is going to be catching that armor, and where you want to create a kind of nice sort of reflective look, I guess. So you can see here we have managed to add some kind of tone variation and the illusion of lighting, the illusion of depth of the armor. We're sort of starting to bring that in here with this modeling layer, while kind of keeping the aesthetic that the armor is not necessarily smooth, and we've achieved that by the modeling process. So I'm going to get this last layer penciled in, then we're going to come back for some fun kind of battle damage effects and things like that. Okay, so we're working up some battle damage on Wally's armor now, and we're taking a sponge here with a mix of Rhinox hide and Chaos Black, or Baden Black even. We're just lightly kind of, you know, attacking this model with a sponge in areas where damage would kind of build up. So you'll have seen, if you watched any of my previous ones, that this is a similar technique I generally tend to use as a kind of way of laying down initial damage on the model. It's very effective, and Rhinox hide and Chaos Black is a really good mix to do for this. So we're just going to kind of pass over the model, pick out some areas, not go too heavy. We don't want to take too much away from Wally's glory. And yeah, then we'll come back. Okay, so we finished our final pass with the armor, and I've added some sponge chipping as well to, really emphasize the fact that good old Wally is a veteran of the long war. And we're just going in with a small brush now, and we're kind of enunciating some of that chipping by just randomly kind of dotting in some extra bits and pieces. This is kind of a random sort of thing that you can just do as much or as little as you feel like. We're not going to go too heavy here because we'll add a couple of other steps afterwards to make this pop. So just kind of some areas that damage would build up over time, we're just going to work on those. And I'll probably add some scratch marks as well using this same brush, just with some light passes. That's where he's at right now, and we're going to come back for the next step then. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit more definition to some of this chipping by adding a bit of Thonda bark kind of into these chips to add a little bit more definition into them. Now, you can kind of, again, keep this pretty random. There's not really a set way of doing it or anything like that, but just adding a little bit of color variety into those chipping areas. So we're going to go over the whole model, we're going to make some of those pop out, and then we'll come back for the next step. Okay, so I added some Mornfang brown to the chipped areas as well to make them a little bit more defined. Now we're going to go in with a real light highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet here underneath some of the chipped areas to add a kind of 3D effect to them. Sort of bring them to life a little bit more in the model. We're also going to highlight some areas on the model itself, like the top of the leg here. I've already done a little bit of it to kind of bring out, we'll say, areas where light is going to be impacting the model. And they'll be toned down a little bit when we start washing this guy, but it gives you a good idea of kind of where light is going to be impacting him. And also, like I said, on those battle damaged areas, it can really help add an extra level of depth to them. Especially on scratch marks, like here, if you get it just right, it can really look quite nice. So yeah, we're going to pass over the whole model, we're going to touch on some of those highlights, and we'll see where we are then. Okay, so we have our chipping and highlights kind of laid down now. So we're going to start penciling in some of this leather details. So we're just going to start by a base coat of red oxide all over these leather details. Not too complicated, we're just going to work it up in 2 thinner layers. And we're going to start adding some kind of definition and detail to that, kind of belts and pouches and these fantastic and absolutely necessary oven gloves that every berserker seems to love to wear. I guess they must do a lot of cooking in the warp when they're not pillaging. Yeah, we're going to lay those down and we'll come back then. Okay, so we have our base coat of rhino oxide laid down on the leather oven gloves. And we're basically just adding this little highlight of Mornfang brown. Now, you kind of want to feather downwards when you're adding this in. It needs to be quite a rough highlight, not a very smooth, very pristine highlight. And I'm going to kind of add some scratch marks where the leather is like worn after a lot of use. Yeah, it's kind of an easy technique to do, but you just need to be patient and careful with it. And don't stress it too much, because if you stress it too much, you kind of start to lose the natural effect of it, of these old worn gloves? I don't know. Really puzzles me, this part of the model, these gloves. Like, you have to remember, these go on over their power armor. They are actively choosing, despite everything the nails are doing to them, they're actively choosing to put these gloves on over their power armor for unknown reasons. And this one has trim. Like, this glove has metallic trim on it. It doesn't make any sense. How does that even work? Yeah, these gloves really puzzle me. I'm gonna do some on the belt on the top here as well, just kind of feather it on. And yeah, we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna come back for the next step. Okay, so we're going to be emphasizing the worn leather kind of effect now by adding a further highlight of Scrag Brown. And we're going to kind of work it within the margins that we laid down in the last layer with Mornfang Brown. So just kind of work inside your lines. Don't go, too crazy on it. You can see it's sort of adding some more kind of realistic effect to it as well. And like up here, we're just gonna kind of touch it on towards the bottom of those, I guess, bandolier. Again, no idea why this guy is wearing a bandolier, like berserkers don't need to shoot. But yeah, we're just gonna work over the whole model, kind of pencil that in. Then we'll come back. Okay, we added one final highlight of Zandri dust just to really make that kind of leather pop and look authentic. I'm going to start laying down some metallic tones now. So we're going to start with a layer of Iron Warriors, and this is just going to be our kind of foundation for the silver metallics. So we're just going to kind of do a single pass over this guy with that, nothing too fancy here. Work that into all the areas that we want to be metallic, and then we'll come back for some highlights on it. Okay, so we have our Iron Warriors foundation laid down. We're just going to go in with good old-fashioned Iron Breaker now, and basically just work towards the source of light. Keep those recessed areas with that nice sort of foundation layer of Iron Warriors. Just work over the whole model, as we did kind of, it's a very kind of standard metallic recipe for this. Once this is done, we're going to go in with a pass of Stormhole Silver and just further enunciate some of those highlights. So yeah, that's going to be the idea for the metallics. We're going to come back once those are done. Okay, so we're going to start basing out our gold parts now. For this, I'm going to do a foundation layer of Runelord Brass. Really nice paints. We're going to do 2 layers of it so that we get a nice solid color. Just pass over all the gold parts as you would normally do, nice and simple, and then we'll come back for a highlight on them. Okay, so we have our initial Runelord Brass sort of foundation for the brass laid down. We're going to come in now with Canoptic Alloy, and we're going to add like a sort of like layered highlight over that Runelord Brass. We're not going to go over the whole thing, we're just going to fixate on the areas that light is going to be catching that metallic tone to really kind of bring out some depth and some nice variation in that color. So we're basically going to go over the whole model and repeat as such, and then we'll come back for some washes. Okay, our initial wash pass is going to be a layer of Null Oil, which, it's the liquid skill itself. We all know it and love it. We're going to make sure that when we're putting this on, and we're going to do it over the whole model, that we're just hanging out in the recesses mostly and sort of glazing it on over the rest of the piece. We don't really want it pooling anywhere that we don't particularly like. And this is just kind of a sort of like a base wash layer. We're going to come in with some tweaks and additional washes after this, but yeah, we're just going to go over the whole model and get that laid down, then we'll come back. Okay, so we have our foundational wash laid down now. We're going to come in now with a wash which is a mix of Agrax Earthshade and Bealtan Green. We're going to kind of focus this on the metallic areas. It's going to add some kind of different tones and kind of like tints, and it'll take a little while to build this one up. We're probably going to do it over 2 layers, but we're going to focus kind of in and around those recesses. It's not going to be an overall wash anymore. And we're probably going to do some towards the bottom parts of the armor as well, just to add a little bit of kind of variation in the color that we have going on there. It'll give a kind of more like older sort of look to some of the armor parts, like it's kind of weathered out. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty fun one to put down. Not too complicated either. It'll look especially good on the metallics, which are going to start kind of showing their age once we have this wash. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to come back for another one. Okay, so we finished up that intermittent wash step, and I've also added another very quick wash, which was a mix of about half and half Bealtan Green and what's it called? Drakenhof Nightshade. And I've just kind of done that in around the rivets and stuff to get a kind of vertiges idea going. After that, I just did a really quick highlight of the metallics, going back with that highlight color we had for the bronze and for the silver, just to touch up and make those kind of areas pop a little bit more. It's nothing too fancy, just the same steps we've already done. So next up, we're going to start adding some sort of dust and muck effects, and we're going to do this around the feet. So what I've done is I've watered down Steel Legion Drab to the point that it's basically a wash. And we're just going to go in on the feet like this, and just focus very much on the kind of crevice areas around here. We're just going to let it kind of pool naturally. It's almost like a pin wash, but we are going to drag it up a little bit more as well, because we're going to be coming in with just a couple more washes after this to really emphasize the effect. So you can kind of play around with this one as you see fit, and you might have to do a couple of layers of washes here to properly get the kind of tone built up and stuff, but it's going to add this kind of older, kind of weathered look to the model, which we're kind of going for a little bit here. So I'm going to basically just focus that around the lower half of the shin guards and around the feet, and leave it at that, because we don't want to push it too high up. It'll start to look unnatural if we do. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to come back for the next step. Okay, so we have that initial wash of Steel Legion Drab put down. We're going to do a more focused pin wash now using Carrick Stone, which we have watered down to that wash consistency again. So for this one, you're basically going to really focus on those like recessed details, and just let the wash kind of do a lot of the work by flowing naturally using capillary action. This will kind of like highlight areas where older mud has dried for longer, hence the kind of lightish tone. You can kind of play around with it as you see fit, just making sure it's not pooling too much in any areas and dragging it around. And basically, you can kind of just use this as a way of creating different kind of like textures and tones in your kind of dust and mud effect. It's a really easy way of doing it. It's very fast. You probably only need to do one pass with this wash. You can also, if you want, add like a couple of dots of kind of like that Carrick Stone wash around the model to kind of represent like splattering and stuff like that. Up to yourself how much of that you want to do, but less is more. That's a really important thing to remember here, because if you do too much, it's just going to get washed out and kind of end up looking a little bit messy. So we're just going to lay that wash down, and then we're going to come back for the next step. Okay, so we have that second mud wash laid down now. To finish this one off, we're just going to take a Shabti Bone, which is watered down not quite as much as the previous layers. And we're just going to dot this in some of the recessed areas to give an indication of like very dried mud. Now you're not going to do like a full pin wash for this, you're just going to pick a couple of areas to focus on. And it'll help give the idea of sort of different amounts of mud that's built up over time. And once it dries out, it'll unify nicely with the previous layers that we've laid down, and give like a really cool idea of different sort of textures of mud and all that kind of thing. So we're just going to do a quick pass over the areas we've already worked on, get that penciled in, and then we're going to move on to some blood effects. Okay, so for the blood effects for this guy, we're going to start by laying down a little bit of Typhus Corrosion over the kind of chain axe area, which will add a little bit of texture to what will be the blood effects. It just kind of helps mark down a rough area where we think we might be kind of messing around with those things, which is helpful for us later on when we're actually putting down the blood effects, so we don't go too overboard with them. And also you might get like, you know, some of that nice little bumpy kind of corrosion particles going on as well, which really help sort of enunciate the gore that we're going to be going for. So we're not going to go too heavy here or anything, just I suppose paying special focus to the chain axe blades, where you know you're going to have a lot of blood built up over time, and kind of coming in and around the actual body of the axe head. We're also going to do just a little bit of Typhus Corrosion around these parts here, and that's purely just to build up some kind of like corrosive deposits rather than actual blood effects. Just as we have the paint out now, it's a good time to be adding those little details in. Again, not going too heavy on this. Less is absolutely more when it comes to diffuse corrosion. And we're just basically going to pass over the model, making sure we have the effect built up in the areas that we want it to be most focused on. So yeah, then we'll come back and start adding the blood. Okay, so for the blood effects here, I'm going my kind of classic blood recipe, which is a mix of blood for the blood god with just a touch of Rhinox hide and Chaos Black. And I'm taking a really old beat up brush with lots of split bristles and basically going in really quick, kind of like stabbing motions. We're not really caring too much about control here at the minute. This is sort of like a dried blood layer that is going to kind of establish the focus for the blood effects. You want to work real quick and fast with this. Don't think too much about it. Just kind of focus on areas where the blood is going to be present most, which is obviously the head of the chain axe here, and just kind of work it nice and fast. And you can see that over this layer of initial typhus corrosion, it's really served as like a foundational point for us when we're laying down this blood effect. And we're just going to bring it up a little bit here towards the kind of part where the axe meets the handle, and just kind of play around with it a small bit. And bring in some around here too. Might have gotten some splash effects, that kind of thing. We're not really going to do anything on the armor. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of painting red armor is that blood effects tend to look quite terrible on it because they just get washed out and you just get this really weird kind of glaze effect going on. So we're just going to kind of keep this focused to the weapon. So I'm just going to do that, and we'll come back for the next step then. Okay, so before the kind of first layer is fully dry, we're going to start working in some raw blood for the blood god over it. And if it's kind of at this like congealed stage where it hasn't fully dried in yet, you can kind of start to get a bit of a blend going on between the two blood layers. And you're going to have this kind of effect of like older, drier blood mixing with fresher, newer blood, which is, you know, kind of like fitting, I guess, because like I can't imagine these guys clean their weapons very often, especially not Wally, considering he is the truest veteran of the Long War. But yeah, basically what you want to do is focus that newer blood like really on the kind of like the teeth of the chain axe, so to speak, and that kind of like main area, because that's where a lot of the fresh blood is going to be built up and won't have kind of been scared away just yet, whereas further up on the chain axe is really where the old blood is going to congeal. So yeah, we're just going to kind of play around with that, sort of being a little bit free here, a little bit controlled as well too though, and just kind of see what effect we can kind of get out of it. And you can kind of bring some of that fresher blood off the old parts as well to get this sort of interesting kind of tone variation going on. This is usually much easier when I'm doing it over a coat of oils, because the blood will sort of separate over that oil medium and give you like quite a nice effect. But this is okay too. So this is kind of what we're looking at the minute. It's not bad. It'll look pretty alright when it's dried out. But yeah, we're just going to go finish up the other side of the chain axe and then come back. Okay, so I took a brief break to do a quick vote on Wally's face here over on Instagram. And I was wondering, do you guys want to see Wally get a set of nice pearly white teeth? And overwhelmingly, the answer was yes, naturally. So I guess we're going to give Wally a set of teeth. So I'm going to go in with Xandri Dust here and just... this is so stupid. Yep. Yeah, this is where we're at right now. This is ridiculous. Oh, he looks so dumb. I'm gonna give him one gold tooth as well. Royal Purple suggested little gold inlay for one of them. So we're gonna do... Oh, I can't take this seriously. He's gonna look so dumb. Alright, I'll be back once I pencil these in. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the OSL now. I've penciled in like the main eye details and a quick highlight around them using Baharat Blue. We're gonna go in with Drakenhof Nightshade now and basically just wash around these areas to sort of lay down a tint for where that light is going to be cast off. This is kind of the standard OSL recipe I use for most of my kind of like blue effects. And it's a very simple one to do. It's basically just building up layers of glazing. And to start it off, we are going to just do this initial wash pass just around the areas where you're going to have that reflective glow, and into the eye sockets and everything like that. I never really thought I was going to be doing OSL on this guy, but here we are, I guess. I don't know. My sanity is definitely fallen away at this point. I just don't know what's going on anymore. Oh, this is so weird. Okay, I'll be back once this wash is dried out. Okay, so our initial wash pass has dried out. We're going to add a layer now, or glaze even. So for this, I've watered down Techless Blue until it's like a glaze consistency. And effectively, we're just going to kind of work back over that area we just washed, but work more kind of towards the sort of source of the light and leave some of that initial wash further back to create a kind of like shadowy idea going on. This is a really simple way of doing OSL, especially if you don't have an airbrush. It's probably the easiest way of doing it. And you can just play around with the glaze as it's drying to make sure that, you know, it's not pooling in areas that you don't want it to and stuff like that. It's a very kind of straightforward method, as you can see. Just gotta kind of tidy up this area here where we have some heavier pigment. So you can kind of play around with it like that and, you know, work the glaze back in. You have areas that aren't really working out, such as this part up here. We're just going to bring in some more of that glaze now. Kind of tidy it all up. You might have to do a couple of passes on this to get it to a level that you're kind of happy with, but don't worry about the initial glaze too much, because we're going to do a couple more glazes before this is all finished and then touch it up with some highlights. So yeah, we're going to work on that and come back for the next glaze then. Okay, so our first glaze has dried out now, and we're going to come in with a second one. This one is going to be a glaze of Lothern Blue. Again, just the Lothern Blue layer, but really watered down. And we're going to focus way more on like the area immediately around the eyes here, just to try and get that build up of the idea of light emanating from the lenses, and we'll wash it in and around the actual sockets as well, just to really build up that glow effect. And once all this is dried out, we're going to come back with some highlights and really make that area pop and kind of draw the eye to the model. So again, you can kind of just play around with this yourself. It takes a little bit of practice to kind of get a feel for exactly what you want to be doing with it, and it's kind of tough on a model like this to work out exactly where the glow is going to be dispersing, just because it's such a weird helmet. But I think we're getting there, so I'm just going to get that laid down and then we'll come back. Okay, so our glazes have finished drying. We're going to do a touch-up highlight around the sort of rim of the helmet here with Basecoat Blue. This is just going to kind of enunciate that glow effect coming from the lenses, and we're also going to dot in the lenses with Basecoat Blue as well. Once we have that done, we're basically going to do the same thing again, but just ease up slightly on the highlight. We're going to mix in Basecoat Blue and White Scar, just to get that final kind of like area of lighting going on. So I'm just going to do both of those highlights, and then we're going to come back and take a look at the model. Okay, I think we're pretty much at the limit of things we can do with old Wally here. I gave it a red hot go. I don't know if I'm happy with the results. My sanity has definitely slipped an awful lot. But here he is. I'm gonna get him based up, we'll take some nice pics of him, and then we'll wrap this video up.
walk the red path. Kill, maim, burn. For the glory of the 12th.
Well everyone, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you had a good time and enjoyed watching me on my journey as I painted Wally the World Eater, the beloved berserker of all. It was pretty fun. I got to admit, real challenge using only the Citadel acrylic paints, but I think we got there in the end, and the result, while not amazing and certainly not my best work, is one that I would say is acceptable and suited to the model. But yeah, that's it. Leave a comment down below if you've been painting your own Wally the World Eater. Let me know if you enjoyed this one, if you'd like to see more of it, or what else you'd like to see in the future for my painting tutorials. As always everyone, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.